All right, hello everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for this event, City Solutions for Climate Smart Food Systems, hosted by Youth Climate Save Canada and Toronto Global Shapers. We're really excited to bring this event to you today. So we're going to start with a land acknowledgement, and then we're going to go into an overview of the organizations hosting the event, and then we're going to give each of our panelists an opportunity to share the amazing work that they're doing. So starting with the land acknowledgement, my name is Nika Moeini, and I'm joining from Treaty 13 territory, with the treaty holders being the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nations. And it's really important to also apply an Indigenous lens to the issues that we're talking about today, although we won't have an opportunity to go too deep into that. It's an important topic to think about, especially as it is Indigenous Awareness Month this month as well. And when we talk about the food system, it's important to realize that a lot of what we see in the food system today is a product of colonization and is a product of Western agricultural practices being brought to Canada and across the world. So with that said, so I'm going to just introduce myself and introduce our panelists that we have here today. So my name is Nika, and I'm a part of Youth Climate Save Canada. I'm one of the organizers of the organization, and I'm also here representing Toronto Global Shapers. And here with us today, we have Anastasia Kiku, who's representing reusables.com and Lighter Footprints. We have Amy Gagné, who's representing Food Cycle Science, Green Communities Canada, and Regeneration. We have Nithal Jethawal, who's representing Veg Climate Network, the Veg Food Bank, and Plant-Based Data. And we have Julia Germania, who's representing Not Far From the Tree. So you'll be able to hear from each of our amazing speakers during the course of this event. And if you have questions on any of the information they've shared, feel free to ask in the chat. And what we're going to do is we're going to have a Q&A after the event. So feel free to just put your questions in the chat and we'll be able to answer them all afterwards. So with that being said, I will start off with just introducing the organizations that are hosting this event today. So let me know if you guys can see. Are you all able to see my presentation screen? Okay, great. So yeah, so I would like to just introduce Youth Climate Save and Toronto Shapers. So Youth Climate Save Canada is a coalition of youth 14 to 30 who are working at the intersection of food and climate change and really work to change policies through activism and awareness building. Then the Toronto hub of the Global Shapers provides emerging young leaders with opportunities for personal leadership development while growing a strong network of civic-minded peers around the globe. And it's interesting that both Youth Climate Save and Global Shapers, they have chapters all over the world. So we're representing the Toronto chapters and the Canada chapters of these organizations, but they're really catalyzing action around the world with young people getting involved in various issues. And together, this event is the first part of a larger project called Food and Climate Connections, which focuses on a few different aspects of the connection between food and climate. So looking at the need to transition to plant-based food systems, addressing food waste, and the inaccessibility of composting. Specifically focused on Toronto, but we're actually interested in expanding to other cities as well. So next slide. Oh, whoops. Sorry, I don't know why I went all the way to slide 26. Okay. Are you guys seeing food and climate at the city level? Okay, yeah, so cities have jurisdiction over a few different things when it comes to food and climate, specifically food procurement. So cities will actually procure their own food for their own staff, their own counselors, their own staff, as well as manage some of the procurement around the city at city properties. City-based climate action plans. So cities will actually create plans to get to, let's say, net zero, for example. And that's something that I believe Toronto has signed on to, is something called C40 cities, which I think Natal might be talking about a little bit. Composting and waste management is also managed by cities, and land use, parks, and libraries are also managed by cities. So that's just to give you an overview of what's actually managed by cities. But that being said, a majority of the population lives in cities, and by the year 2050, actually a large percentage of the population will live in cities, and that's why it's important for us to think about what can we do to make our cities as sustainable as possible, and as especially when it comes to food. So I'm going to focus on one main issue in my presentation quickly, which is animal agriculture. And we've been seeing so many headlines coming out talking about the impact of animal agriculture on climate change. And there's actually a lot that we can do at a city level. But just to look at some of these headlines, for example, we need to reduce meat consumption to hit our climate targets. A lot of deforestation is being driven by animal agriculture. And we're seeing that actually the way the food is produced has a larger footprint than the transportation of food as well. So these are really important issues to think about, and issues that Youth Climate Safe specifically focuses on as well. So in terms of solutions, there's a variety of different solutions. I'm going to talk a little bit about something called the plant-based treaty, which I'll get into. And within the plant-based treaty, there's solutions mentioned like vertical and community gardens, so that people have more access to healthy plant-based fruits and vegetables that are affordable and local to them. So just to go over a little bit about plant-based treaty. So I'm one of the youth ambassadors for this grassroots campaign, and it's really designed to put bottom-up pressure on world leaders to negotiate this agreement to halt the impact of animal agriculture. So core principles are relinquished, so stopping land use change and deforestation, redirect, so redirecting subsidies, taxes, and public information, and restoring ecosystems set through, for example, reforestation or protecting ocean areas. So these 3 R's of the plant-based treaty are supported through campaigns like plant-based cities and universities, divestment, community gardening, etc. And the various tactics are through advocacy, partnerships, and coalitions with other environmental and food groups. So the goals are by the year 2023 to have this number of endorsements and support for the treaty. So at the moment, there is 35,000 individuals and 14 cities, now that we're talking about cities. So various celebrities have endorsed, as well as IPCC experts. So IPCC is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, as well as Nobel laureates as well. And now we're talking about cities. So various politicians have supported this treaty at various levels of parliament. So in the example of the UK, they've actually brought this at a national level. So they've brought 20 MPs brought the support for plant-based treaty into their House of Commons there, in South Africa as well, and even in Mexico. So it's a very intersectional, cross-national movement. So what cities can actually do when it comes to supporting something like the plant-based treaty is to actually first declare a climate emergency, which many cities did in 2019, for example, Toronto. However, it was kind of just seen as a, like a trendy thing to do. And it's not really clear like how much has really come out of declaring that, but it's important to really recognize the climate emergency. Then they can actually start incorporating into their climate action plans more focus on the shift to plant-based. And then also when it comes to schools, hospitals, well, in the case of Canada, mostly local school boards, as well as other city-run jurisdiction, right? So cities that have actually started going in this direction are, for example, Oxford, UK, who will only serve vegan food at their council events, and says that this is choices not just for ourselves, but for our future generations, for both climate change and public health. The city of New York passed plant-based school lunches on Fridays, and over 1,700 schools in that district are now receiving plant-based foods. Helsinki, Finland as well, no longer serving meat or cow's milk at council events. Stonington, Australia encourages residents to adopt a plant-based diet. This is the Netherlands. So you can see that a lot of cities have done different things. And so when it comes to the city level, 14 cities have formally endorsed the treaty. And what you can do if you want your city to get involved is you can set up a group, you can email your councilors, you can actually meet with your councilors as well and form partnerships with other groups within your city that are passionate about these issues to bring this up to them. So other activities are default veg. So default veg, we mentioned, for example, the Netherlands serving default vegan meals at their events. So that's like one main thing that cities can do, as well as awareness building. So raising awareness and also having information campaigns for citizens to know about the impacts of food on the climate. So to take action, this is something you can do today. So you can sign the plant-based treaty. You can also watch these 3 movies. So if you go to 3movies.org/Nika, it'll actually give you a link to watch any of these movies, and they're on Netflix as well as YouTube. And it'll just really give you the facts and the overview of the various ways that animal agriculture is harming the planet. And yeah, that's my presentation. So I will now pass it to Anastasia to go next.
Thank you, Nika. That was really comprehensive, and I actually learned a lot as well. Can you see my full screen? Perfect. So thank you for having me today. My name is Anastasia Kiku, and I kind of wear 2 hats on a daily basis, and it sounds like a lot of people do. So in most of my life right now, I'm a co-founder at reusables.com, where zero waste packaging as a service platform based here in Vancouver. And then I'm also advising Lighter Footprint, that is developing climate labeling for food. So the problem Lighter Footprint is addressing is exactly that people don't really understand how big of an impact their diet changes. And for us, the aha moment was when we learned that beef has 60 times the carbon footprint of tofu. And no one knows that. So kind of the question in our minds is, what if we make it really easy for people to see the impact that their diet choices are making? So it'll be similar to nutrition label, but kind of communicating the climate metrics. But for my presentation today, I'll focus on reusables.com because that's what I'm mainly involved as. So just to give you a background, reusables.com started at the height of the pandemic. To remind you what was happening then is all the restaurants had to close their dining operations and transition almost 100% to takeout. What was happening at the same time is that takeout created a lot of the packaging waste, because once you receive your food, it came in single-use containers. And then after the meal, if you're a good citizen, you would clean them and put in your recycling. And still only 5 to 9% of them were ever recycled, meaning that a big percentage of them was going to the landfill, unfortunately. So my co-founder and I were seeing this problem and asking ourselves, is there a better way to do the whole takeout? So we just launched last March. So we've been in operations just over a year. Back then we had 4 restaurant partners and just 100 people signed up. And in the past year, we've grown to more than 60 locations and more than 2,000 users using our service, which really shows us that people are aware of the problem. They're actively looking for alternatives. And now it's just up to us to make it really easy and transition as many people as possible. An important thing that we do is obviously measure our impact. And for reusables, the impact really translates to the number of containers reused, which on a city level translates to kilograms of single-use waste diverted from municipal waste streams. Because as Nika said, waste management is a direct responsibility of the city. And then reusing the containers and participating in the circular economy actually leads to savings in carbon as well. So I just wanted to show you kind of a case study of what circular economy on a city level looks like, and just show you all the different actors that need to come together and work together. So when you're thinking about ways of getting involved, there's actually a variety of different ways that you can help. So Reusables now works with food businesses and also universities and hospitals. So think pretty much anywhere where there is food that is packaged, and that's in so many places right now. And then we also need forward and reverse logistics. So think about like any delivery company that's moving goods. It has the opportunity to participate in the circular economy as well. Then there is the collection infrastructure. So currently, if you walk around the cities, you see the garbage bins around, some recycling bins around as well. But then the question is, why don't we just create a fourth stream that will be for reusables? And excitingly enough, I don't know if many of you are based in the city of Vancouver, but there is a company called Return It, and they're piloting this project with Tim Hortons, Starbucks, and capture programs like us as well, where they're installing those bins throughout the city. So it's really convenient for people to just like walk into a bus station to drop off their reusable, and it doesn't have to be more inconvenient than single use anymore. Then there is the washing hubs, because cleaning and sanitation becomes a crucial component of circular economy. We need to make sure that certain standards are followed, and people don't feel the transition to circular economy comes at a sacrifice to health and safety of the population. And then there is a need for tracking technology as well, because essentially what we're doing is circulating assets, and Reusables has developed its own software to track those containers throughout the circular economy. Then the piece that we provide for cities is the ESG reporting, knowing that many of them have their zero waste strategies, their goals, their targets they're measuring. It's really important to be able to communicate to them how our solution is helping them achieve exactly that. And then in terms of rewards, what we've seen in the city of Vancouver is that they introduced a 25-cent fee on single-use cups this January to disincentivize people from getting single use. But so far, it's been debatable whether that has been effective, since 25 cents is such a small monetary disincentive that it's not enough to change people's behavior. So now we're thinking, like, who can provide rewards and incentives to change the behavior? And then lastly, since the provincial government, the federal government is interested in transitioning to circular economy in their bigger strategy to transition to net zero, there is quite a bit of funding available on different levels, specifically for municipalities. So yeah, when we're talking about ways to get involved, I think you can find yourself kind of helping with any of those components, but also on a higher level, again, it just all starts with education. So if there is an area you're passionate about, whether it's your favorite restaurant that you want to become more sustainable, just tell them this information. Tell them first that the food you're serving actually has a pretty big impact on the climate. And second of all, tell them to think about the packaging they're using. Thank you. I'll pass it off to Amy. I was supposed to say that.
All good. And can we all see my screen? Can't see anyone? Yes, okay, wonderful. So hello, good afternoon. My name is Amy Gagné. I'm calling in as a guest from the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin people. So that's Ottawa, Ontario, for those who don't know. I am a sustainability professional, storyteller, social climate justice activist. I'm a project coordinator for Municipal Solution at Food Cycle Science. And I'm also the co-director of decolonization with Regeneration, which Nika and I work together. So we're a group of Canada's most impact-focused students and young professionals. And we use our energy to open doors for the next generation of sustainability leaders, as well as the board director of the chair of the Youth Engagement Committee at Green Communities Canada. But today I'll be focused on food cycle science since we're talking about city solutions. So who is food cycle science? So according to the United Nations, about 17% of globally produced food each year is wasted, and Canada wastes about 79 kilograms of food a year at home, which is way more than Americans and the United Kingdom. So Food Cycle Science is a company that's born from the alarming fact that 63% of food waste is avoidable and responsible for up to 10% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions. So what we did at Food Cycle Science is we developed an innovative solution called the Food Cycler. So it's a countertop kitchen appliance that turns food waste into a soil amendment in just 4 to 8 hours, that can be then used for gardening or landscaping applications. It can also be pelletized for home heating. And with the Food Cycler, we support communities to reduce food waste in landfills, which also helps them taking trucks off the road since you can treat food waste right in your own home, reduces infrastructure and collection costs, and contributes to a 95% reduction in CO2 emissions compared to sending food waste to a landfill. So we currently work with a lot of small, rural, remote, Indigenous and Northern communities to deploy this clean technology as a solution to food waste. And most of these communities really struggle with managing their waste. So their landfill's lifespan might be at capacity. There's no pickup services available for garbages in a lot of remote areas. Some municipalities also struggle with a bear problem, so outdoor composting is not really feasible. And so as of today, we have 38 Canadian municipalities across 7 provinces and territories who have signed on to the Food Cycler program. And we also have data from about 1,500 households and 14 municipalities that currently completed their pilot as well. So we implement this pilot program using the Food Cycler across Canada. And an example is the city of Nelson in BC, with a population of about 10,000 people, is currently in the process of having a food cycler in every home to be utilized as a food waste solution. So this is just what the food cycler looks like. You put in your food waste, you add the bucket, you press start. It can take anything from vegetables, tea bags, fish and poultry bones, eggshells, and it comes down to this byproduct soil amendment that can be then used for gardening purposes. So one of our pilot program's most important topic is community engagement. So we believe that community engagement is one of the cornerstones of creating a resilient and sustainable community. So we're not here to simply sell a product, but also to increase community engagement and also raise awareness, education, etc. So Food Cycler pilot project is we really provide an opportunity to engage the local community on all levels, since municipal waste services, waste management is a municipality's responsibility. So for example, on the top right image, the Easton Acres Farm in Hornpain. So this is a family farm that have a drop-off bin on their property. So where people who uses the food cycler can then leave their soil amendment or byproduct if they can't use it in their home garden. So if they live in an apartment, for example, when they run the food cycler, the byproduct can then be donated to a local farm. So this local farm in Hornpain uses it as a food fertilizer to grow their food and recirculates the resources. So the system has been working very well and offsets the need for that farm to use any artificial fertilizer. So through our pilot project, we really focus on the concept of circularity, and we really encourage, and we also provide support to our municipal partners to establish a partnership with local communities, community gardens, retirement homes, schools, and community centers. So as I said, a huge part of this is also raising awareness about food waste and educating others about the impacts of food waste. So we really strive to help future generation take ownership of their food waste and shift away from the definition that waste equals useless, and really dig into that colonial concept of waste that Nika was kind of talking about. So by creating this intimate relationship with food waste, we have students seeing how much food waste they produce a day. We're really hoping to have these behaviors reflect to other aspects of waste. And so not only that, but educating about food waste is also tied into educating about food security, agriculture, and climate change. So we're also partnered with Equal Schools Canada and the Outdoor Learning Store to help really deepen students' awareness of food waste and introduce ways to recirculate their food waste sustainably. So from growing their food to disposing their food waste. So we're currently present in over 100 classrooms across Canada. So we have certain high schools that have a cooking program. So they use the food cycler to dispose of their food waste, create the soil amendment. Then they also have their school garden. So they use it in their school garden, grow their food, and then the circle continues. So a lot of topics that can be used with the food cycler. So school gardening, obviously, they use the food cycler in their classrooms and then use their fertilizer for their garden, which creates the circular economy, like I said, agriculture, food waste, sustainable waste management, innovation, and clean technology. Something is happening. Anyways, we really educate students to take ownership of their food waste and encourage food waste reduction behavior at the individual and community level. And through that, we're hoping to see changes in building a resilient community. So one of the images there is a postcard of a workshop that we did, which was, write to your future municipality. And so one of the students wrote here, before we know it, we will be living in a real life Wall-E. And as much as I think flying in a spaceship would be cool, our planet is much cooler. So we do a lot of education outside of this in hopes to really creating a resilient community. So thank you so much. And that is it for me. And I will pass it on to Nital. Am I saying that right? I'm sorry.
Pretty close.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm pretty impressed with what I've seen so far in these presentations. It's actually quite inspiring. I'm just gonna see if this works. You guys see that, right? Okay. Hey everyone, I've got two screens going here, so I apologize if you see my eyes start. Thanks to Nika and Youth Climate Safe for having me today. It's a pleasure to be here. So my name is Nika. I'm an independent vegan economist and policy analyst committed to food systems change. Specifically, my goal is seeing more whole plant-based foods in a more decentralized food system, starting with my hometown, Toronto. These are the different organizations that I'll just be covering very quickly today, through which I'm doing some of that work. I actually always thought my education and past work experience in policy at Agriculture Canada would have kept me focused on change at the national level, but my local not-for-profit work and collaboration over the past couple of years have shown me how effective it can be to also focus on change at the municipal level. So to get started, just a quick discussion on systems change altogether. A few quick points on why trying to change food systems municipally can be powerful using Toronto as a case study. So first, somehow, as you've kind of already heard today, the impact of food on the climate and environment continues to be underappreciated. You're likely aware that food systems account for over a third of global emissions, and production, and thereby consumption, contribute over 80% of the emissions within a food system. And shockingly, the greenhouse gas inventory that Toronto is using that underpins our long-term net zero strategies like Transform TO omit the emissions of food produced outside of Toronto. So in fact, the C40 network estimates that 85% of emissions associated with goods and services in a city are generated outside of the city's borders. So there's a massive gap here in the estimates that we have currently that are underpinning a lot of Toronto's strategy, and it really undervalues food. So in terms of influencing and enabling food-related change, we can have a huge reduction in emissions by focusing on food. And as you can see here, household consumer behavior drives 70% of emissions, and that dietary changes can have a huge impact. And despite the fact that we have plant-based specific commitments at the City of Toronto, we have yet to see any food-specific action be implemented. So while that does strike people as a lot of challenge, it also represents a lot of opportunities. First organization I just want to cover quickly is VegTO, recently rebranded from the Toronto Vegetarian Association. We are, sorry, screen froze. So our mission is to inspire people to choose healthier, greener, more compassionate lifestyles, as you can see on the left here. And perhaps a blessing in disguise from the pandemic was forcing us to figure out how to create more impact, not just for the City of Toronto, but for the vegan movement altogether. That has led to an expanded advocacy focus, which is what led us to run Toronto's first poll ever on food preferences and awareness, and to create the Veg Climate Network, which I'll get to momentarily. So what's next for VegTO? We have this poll that we designed in consultation with 5 key stakeholders, including Animal Justice and the Veg Food Bank. We will be releasing those results in the coming weeks, next month. And the results will hopefully prove to be very useful for us in our outreach thereafter. We found a surprisingly high amount of people are committed in Toronto, committed to reducing their meat consumption and aware of the impact of foods, aware of the impact of food choices on the environment. We also at VegTO will be looking to have the Vegan Film Festival screened again at Hot Dog Cinema, although that is to be confirmed. And for those of you familiar with Veg Food Fest, the 30th will be returning to Harbourfront September 10th and 11th with a ton of vegan fare. If you're interested in any of this and wanting to get involved there, you can join. That's the simplest way at veg.ca, become a member. With $25 membership, you get this discount card that gets you all these discounts of vegan businesses. And I just wanted to really quickly call attention to the fact that we're still looking for summer interns. So you can apply, just go to our social media and you'll see a link there. The expanded advocacy focus has led to an arm of the VegTO to be created called the Veg Climate Network. Our mission statement here is reducing climate change one plate at a time. And I have to say, I've been very pleasantly surprised at how organically this has grown. And it's actually the reason why I've met Nika, and for me, largely the reason for me being here with you today. So locally, the Veg Climate Network, what we are is a collaboration of not-for-profits working together to increase plant-based foods throughout not just Toronto, but also in all C40 cities. For those of you who aren't familiar with C40, as Nika alluded to earlier, it's a global network of 97 cities in total, representing a quarter of the global economy and 700 million people, and who are all committed to having their emissions by 2030. There is a specific Good Foods Declaration called the Good Food Cities Declaration. 14 cities signed on. Toronto is one of them that had specific commitments to increasing whole plant-based food consumption. So our current goal right now is to just raise awareness. It started as raising awareness with C40 organizations like ours in other C40 cities. And it has really grown into a lot more of a local focus in the past year. So we're working to overall push the city to follow Vancouver's recently to swap out animal-based foods for plant-based foods in their procurement. We've also engaged with the Toronto District School Board and are in dialogue with their sustainability committee on how they can increase healthy plant-based foods for our public schools. Meanwhile, we're regularly meeting or connecting with educators or students, and we're in the process of developing resources for students, teachers, or parents, or other stakeholders looking to make their schools more plant-based. You've already heard about Default Veg, and Meatless Monday is another resource that we advocate for. Globally, we're partnered with the International Vegetarian Union, whose current chair, Marley Winkler, was a catalyst in the meat-free program in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Over 11 years ago it started, and now today serves over 1 million meals, vegan meals, to students every week across 3,500 schools in 100 cities. So moving forward on the global side, we'll be looking to raise awareness with the cities that are currently in our network. We have a small network. It's just we're focused on the local work more. And those groups include the Kenyan Vegan Society, European Vegetarian Association, and some others. So this is really where the bulk of the impact and focus on municipal policy has been happening for me. We submitted a proposal to City Council starting with Mike Layton, and we'll be meeting with him in a couple of weeks to discuss how Toronto can follow Vancouver's footsteps. It turns out that the Vancouver City Councillor who championed that resolution there is good friends with Mike Farley, or at least well connected to him through their work on the National Zero Food Waste Council. Advancing discussions with the Toronto District School Board, who asked us to apply for a partnership so we can more formally work together. And exciting, probably the most exciting area right now that's also the least developed is developing nudge pilots. And for those of you, I think will probably be well familiar, most of you here, nudge policies are basically non-intrusive nudges are non-intrusive behavioral interventions that encourage positive behavior without restricting personal freedom. So you're just trying to influence the choice architecture. And we're looking at that right now for not just schools, but also hospitals. Typically, hospital menus are decided, governed provincially, but this is an area that might be subject to influence on an immediate local level. We have the Educator for Animal Conference coming up in August. And for those of you not familiar, there is a Coalition for Healthy School Food currently pushing for Canada to become the last G7 country to offer a national school food program. The budget there's now a federal commitment, but the budget hasn't money yet set aside despite commitments. And both with Matt Noble and the Veg Food Bank team, and as well as VegTO, we're trying to influence or at least provide input and reminders to everybody, like don't forget about plant-based and keep everything by the food guide. And it's been a really pleasant surprise to see how many non-vegetarians or vegans are on board with that. Meanwhile, we'll be continuing to expand partnerships and collaboration here. There are so many people, as you're always getting a taste of today, who are doing different work in great areas that's all overlapping or connected. And finally, the next C40 Mayor's Summit is coming up in October, in Buenos Aires. So we will be working with Marley and her team at IBU to create more awareness globally. That menu at that conference better be plant-based. And hopefully we will raise awareness there. So if you're interested in learning a bit more, I know I'm rushing through a little bit here, but I really encourage you to join our team, even if just to hear more. We're looking to reach more youth as they're the ones driving a lot of the movement. And you'll hear more about what we're up to through a newsletter if you sign up, subscribe rather at vegclimatenetwork.org. We're really new on Twitter, so don't judge the fact that we only have 10 followers, but we're looking to get more active there. We could really use any help on either the city's team or school's team, as there's all these opportunities that are available to us that we're slow to react to. Thirdly, the Veg Food Bank, possibly one of my favorite organizations on earth. There's not enough time here to cover the importance of food security for marginalized people and groups, but suffice to say, it's important that we don't just provide food to people, but a community and resources to those in need. It is really sad to see what's happening right now between inflation and food prices. We're generally lucky in Canada to not be spending more than 10% of our income on food, but it really does affect people in more marginalized places in countries, and that is not different in pockets of Toronto. So we do have a team of dietitians and nutritionists to support people in their transition or their current path in being vegan or vegetarian. That's kind of our catchment area. And excitingly, our executive director, Matt Noble, has been working hard to get a farm going at the Wishing Well Sanctuary with the ultimate goal of increasing our own food supply. I'll be including a trailer for Nika to send out after this panel that you can see that covers the food bank. So if you're interested in getting involved there, we're resuming our in-person service. We've been doing deliveries for a while now because of the pandemic, which is at Yonge Street Mission. And we're also, as I mentioned, working on that farm, largely Matt and a core group of volunteers. You can also support we have an annual Fast for Hunger campaign. And there's obviously some social media activity you can follow at Veg Food Bank on Instagram. Finally, plant-based data is the last team I'm representing today. And it kind of ties into systems change at a broader level and on a more academic. We're a one-stop shop for high-level and academic papers, summaries, and reports. These sections, environment, the face of plant-based data in a way is Nick Carter. Health and Zoonics is covered by Dr. Tushar Mehta, and the two of them co-founded the site, and I just tag along for economics and policy. That area is due for a large update in case you do visit it anytime soon. We are right now working on constant reviews and research. Those of you on this call might be interested in, there's a new report from the World Bank and the International Food Policy and Research Institute on repurposing subsidies, which is an important conversation starter. There was also this week a WTO ministerial conference on fishing subsidies, which for those of you who know me is like a huge, has been a huge bone to pick for me for quite some time. So we'll be doing some research and sharing that, as well as focusing currently on how to better integrate, at least for my own policy, all the different work you're kind of seeing here, which is at the municipal level with provincial and federal work. So there's a couple of groups doing great work there. Nations Rising has a policy team focused on federal policy and ag subsidies. And there's Youth Social Impact is a group that is starting to focus on the provincial level, looking to engage and minister education, looking to influence education in schools specifically. And Tushar and Nick are always on podcasts and talks. So if you're ever interested, you can check them out, chatting about some of the stuff in the future. So if you would like to get involved there, you can just use and share the database and follow us on Twitter. And also we could always use help if anybody has any video or film editing skills and social media skills. And just to really quickly sum up, some of what the lessons I've learned so far along with my co-chair, Mark Simmons, who started the Veg Climate Network with me, that have been valuable are the utility of showcasing alternatives that work. So not just going in with, standing against something, but standing for something. It's cheesy, but it's really true. And to that end, finding programs that work is a really good conversation starter with decision makers. And so there are local programs. Some of you might have heard there's a fruit and vegetable prescription program. For example, in Ontario, some doctors can prescribe fruits and vegetables for patients. There is a program in BC for fruit and vegetable vouchers, where the government's working with cities to figure out how to get low-income citizens more fruits and vegetables. And for those of you who don't know, 3/4 of Canadians, and Toronto included, aren't eating enough fruits and vegetables. It's possibly the silver bullet for us solving a lot of issues around health while also reducing climate emissions and improving our environmental situation. Incentives are absolutely key, as you've kind of already heard today. And collaborating widely is something that you would be surprised at how many people are working in different areas who will be willing to collaborate with you. And finally, as I just mentioned, with plant-based data, is connecting federal and provincial policy is also really useful. So for example, in Canada, there is now a national food guide that's largely plant-based. There is a federal commitment to make it a plant-based protein leader. You can really make a strong argument for economic growth and innovation in alt meats, for example, by connecting the dots on how local innovation and growth strategies or Toronto's economic development plan or our vision. There's a vision document for the food and beverage sector, which is the city's second biggest, on how those might benefit from nudging in these directions and pushing more plant-based from this increased federal funding and focus. So I know that was a lot. Appreciate the time. And if you would like to get in touch, you can reach me at Plant-Based Econ online or at any of these email addresses. And I believe now I will be passing it over to Julia.
Yes, hello, 1 second, folks. It's been so interesting listening to what everyone's been doing, and I've learned so much about new organizations operating in different parts of the country, which is really cool. And okay, let me just get this going. Cool. Okay, can everyone see my screen? Yeah, perfect. And you can see my notes, no? Okay, so hi everyone, my name is Julia Germania. I'm the project director at Not Far From the Tree. So we're Toronto's only fruit picking and sharing project. There's Hidden Harvest in Ottawa and Life Cycles that operates in BC, both amazing organizations. We're all pretty much doing really similar work. But Not Far From the Tree, like I mentioned, are only this is fruit picking and sharing project that connects people to community green space and the urban orchard and reduces food waste. Since 2008, Not Far From the Tree has diverted over 230,000 pounds of fruit from landfills and have partnered with over 63 social service agencies. So this is just like a fun slide. You can read more about it when Nika sends it out or when you visit our website. Just wanted to keep everything clean and clear. So in Toronto, we're surrounded by a massive urban orchard that produces over 1.5 million pounds of fruit per year. And that number does not include fruit grown in people's backyards. A lot of this fruit ends up going unpicked and ends up rotting in landfills. We know that rotting fruit releases greenhouse gas emissions and contributes to our massive problem, which we've been talking about a lot today, food waste and the effects on climate. So I won't go further into that. Fruit also shouldn't be falling on the floor when there's a massive food insecurity problem happening in Toronto and happening across the country right now. Someone had mentioned inflation. I saw in a No Frills flyer that a bag of cherries is going for $6 a pound when you can just participate in our program and pick some cherries and then everyone can have cherries. So we just want to make sure that as many people as possible have access to healthy local food and the urban orchard. So you'll see on the slide, it tells you a bit about how our program is run, but essentially the bounty of each pick is split 3 ways. 1/3 is goes back to the tree registrant, who usually contacts us to come pick their tree when they've tapped out from their fruit. Another 1/3 goes to the volunteers. So we have 6 volunteers that lead the pick and pick the fruit. And then the other 1/3 goes to a social service agency by bike. That's how we originally started, but as Not Far From the Tree has been expanding outside of the downtown core, we noticed that folks are using their cars because they're coming from Vaughan, Pickering, outside of Toronto. So it's a little hard to access by TTC. If you're in Toronto, you know, and if you don't live in Toronto, TTC is not the easiest way or most efficient way to get around. But then, yeah, we also have folks that deliver the fruit by car and come to picks by TTC. Food social service agencies include anything from food banks, community kitchens, supportive housing programs, or community health centers. Essentially anyone that is operating a meal program or providing food to folks that don't have access to it on the regular. Not Far From the Tree will gladly drop the fruit off. Some of our social service agencies will use that fruit. They'll host preserving workshops with their clients. And then that jam they can either take home, they'll use it in their meal programs. Some social service agencies use the jams as a fundraising initiative for their own, for their own agency. We have one agency called Engen. They actually take the fruit, add it to a soup, dehydrate it, and then give this like a little packet of fruit to seniors, which then all they need to do is just add some hot water and boom, they have a nutritious soup. They have an easy meal. So that's what we do. We pretty much use a local approach. As you can kind of tell, we're picking within the small area. Toronto's really large, and we rely on like community and that neighborhood model to make our program run essentially. And there's so many ways to get involved with Not Far From the Tree, but if you are within our catchment area and when you visit our link, our website will explain it. If I tell you it's really mouthy and wordy and you might get lost, we're currently starting to expand our borders, do a pilot expansion a little bit into Scarborough and Etobicoke to kind of see how that works and see what our lessons learned to decide what is the best model for Not Far From the Tree to grow. But you can become a picking member. So that means you can go on picks throughout the city. We pick cherries, mulberries, crab apples, pears, peaches, plums, sometimes pawpaws, elderberries, service berries. You can sign up your fruit tree. It's $30 to sign up. It will come as many times as needed. It doesn't matter how many fruit trees you have on your property or fruit bushes. To become a picking member, it's $10, and we waive the fee for any of our social service agency clients so that they can actively participate. We organize private picks for our social service agency clients so they can have access to the urban orchard. And then we also are recruiting pick leaders. So pick leaders are the ones that schedule the picks. They pick up the equipment. So we have in different neighborhoods around the city, our catchment area, we have cargo bike picking poles and just supplies needed to pick the fruit. The pick leader does that and then also drops off the food to a social service agency that's closest to the pick. So that's kind of a big piece about our model is we're connecting with your neighbors and sharing that fruit with your neighbors. So we encourage the pick leader to pick because they have to then bike 200 pounds of apples to the closest social service agency possible. So that's pretty cool. And for the most part, that sums up Not Far From the Tree in a nutshell. We just want to reduce food waste and share the fruit that our city grows and show people that a local food model is possible. And part of our goal is to sustain the urban orchard. So we work with like replanting, like edible shrubs or fruit trees and just encouraging more people to explore. When you see mulberry trees lined up on the street, Why go to the store and spend $6 to buy dried mulberries when they're literally splatting on the floor and they go in the garbage, and we all know what happens to rotting fruit. So that pretty much concludes my spiel on Not Far From the Tree. You can follow us on social media. We just launched our season, and our first cherry pick starts on Friday. And so yeah, we're super stoked. And I will pass it to Nika for the next piece. And I should probably stop sharing my screen, right?
No worries. All right. Wow. What an amazing group of presentations. I learned so much today. So thank you everyone for your wonderful contributions. So yeah, in our last 10 minutes here, I'll just kind of go through some of the questions in the chat, and feel free to now drop any questions you have for any of the panelists in the chat. So one of the questions, this is for Amy, around the food cycler like machine. So how someone asks, how much is the unit, and are there different sizes for the unit? So yeah, I will pass it over to you to kind of take that one first.
Yeah, so the unit retails through Vitamix at $500. But if it's purchased through a municipality and they're working towards a solution, then Food Cycle Science provides a $200 discount. So it becomes $300. And what we usually ask with the municipality is to share the cost with the residents. So it's about a 150 split. So they can purchase it at 150 and they can keep the food cycler for as long as they want. It's just a way of including municipalities as part of the responsibility to provide municipal services. Was there another question for me? Sorry.
That's amazing. Yeah, they just asked, like, does it turn to compost when it's completed?
Oh, yes. It does not turn into compost. It does not turn into dirt, but it does accelerate the process of the composting. So you have to mix the byproduct with the soil, and it's kind of an accelerated version of compost. And as for the size, we do have different sizes. So currently the bucket capacity is 2.5 liters, but I believe we're launching another one at 5 liters. And we also have commercial units that are a lot bigger for restaurant, cafes, and smaller businesses as well.
Very cool. Yeah, I definitely want to get one because my apartment is one of the ones that doesn't have access to composting, and our apartment board is like very against it for some reason. So I can't compost, but that's a really cool solution. So yeah, I will ask a question while we wait for maybe any other questions to come in. So for everybody, like, if you could have one idea be like taken up by the city of Toronto, or whatever city you're from, but let's just say city of Toronto in this hypothetical question, like what would it be and why? So for me, I would say it's kind of challenging because there's a few different ones that I really want. But since we're talking about composting, I would say to actually make like access to composting mandatory for each resident. So even if the apartment chooses to go with a private contractor, like the residents will still have a place to go. I'll just call on someone and feel free to pass it on. I'll pass it on to Natal.
I think I would go with fruit and vegetable vouchers, or a program or initiative that makes fruit and vegetables widely accessible and cheaper. Ultimately, ending with fruit and vegetable stands everywhere like 7-Elevens.
I would actually like to see the city of Toronto endorse Not Far From the Tree and help make this program on a local level and for every ward in the city of Toronto. So something like having fruit stands extremely accessible to people, which builds community, reduces food waste, and this program can be easily replicated by residents all over the GTA.
Just listening to everyone, I wasn't even aware that composting is not a thing in some cities. So it just makes me so aware how privileged we are in Vancouver and BC. So hopefully, yeah, municipal composting makes it to everywhere in Canada and across the world soon. And for me, I would say ban single-use packaging. I don't know if that's realistic this given year, but I think we just like really need some radical action because we just cannot be throwing like using a coffee cup for 3 minutes and then throwing it in the trash anymore.
I guess I can go. I would like to see, I'm not from Toronto, but I would like to see a stronger collaboration between the private, the nonprofit, what's the other one? And the public sector, especially when we're tackling issues like this. I would love to see just one big program that implements everything that everyone is doing, all the panelists are doing today. And I feel like that would be a much a stronger pitch, you know, to the government to kind of see how we can work on funding all together and incorporate different issues of food security like all together. I think that would be wonderful.
Amazing. Yeah, I'm gonna email this to every city councilor, so now they know what to do. Okay, amazing. So yeah, I don't see any more questions. So thank you so much, everybody, for coming today. We are going to be sharing this recording. So yeah, so I'm gonna share a link to everyone after the event by email, where you'll be able to find the recording as well as the slides. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to continuing this conversation and to stay in touch with what we do next, our upcoming events. Feel free to follow Youth Climate Save Canada on Instagram in particular, and that's where we share a lot of information, but we can also email you all about next steps. So yeah, thanks again, everybody. Thank you to our awesome panelists, and we will see you all soon. Have a great rest of your Thursday.
Thank you for joining.